There's only one boss in this place, and that's me. The HNIC.
Hey everybody, Brett with Indie Comics Dispatch and Head Nerds in Charge. Joining me today is Newton Lilavois, creator, writer for Crescent City Monsters. I'm so excited to have you on. I've been following Crescent City Monsters for a while now and love the work. Newton, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
No problem, man. Thanks for taking the time to be here. We had a couple of hiccups. You had some family stuff going on, but I'm glad you were still able to make it. You took the time. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
So let's start by just telling everybody a little bit about yourself. What's your background? Tell us your origin story.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just a regular guy who happens to do comics now. So I'm not sure how far back you want to go, but I'll go back to. So I was originally born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Came here to the States when I was real young. About, I guess 5 years old. Live in New York City for all my life. So I'm Haitian American. My regular 9 to 5 is I'm a web developer, an IT consultant, and on the side I create comics such as Crescent City Monsters. Crescent City Monsters is a supernatural story about Jonas, who's a blues musician, and there's a bounty put on his head, and he doesn't know who or why that bounty is on his head. So, and the monsters of Crescent City Monsters actually collect on that bounty, and it changes his life forever. And I'm trying not to spoil a lot for those who haven't read it. It changes his life forever, and he's on a quest to figure out why and who put this bounty on his head.
Very cool. Very cool. Instagram was having a little trouble hearing me, and I'm just checking to see if anybody out there can hear me now. So just let me know. If you can't hear, switch over to Facebook, YouTube. I know those streams are stable. Instagram's always dicey, y'all. They can hear you fine, though. So you're the important part anyway. So have you always been a big fan of comics?
Yeah. I've always been a big fan of comics. So I know there are a lot of indie creators who went through the same thing I did. So I started reading comics seriously when I was, I guess, in the 5th grade. So that's around like 10 or 11 years old. And the people who in my class who were really into comics really introduced me more to Marvel. So I have to say that my early experience in comics was Marvel comics. For some reason, the kids in my class really thought DC was like corny. So
what?
Yeah.
You see the Superman stuff behind me. I'm a DC guy.
Yeah, it's funny too because in a way I kind of regret it because I grew up reading a lot of Marvel comic books, and I was really into the history of the characters. And I just people would ask me like, "What was your favorite Marvel comic book growing up?" And I just loved everything. So, and looking back on it, and now, people, they'll bring up DC characters. And because I didn't really grow up reading a lot of that, I only have like a real, like, superficial knowledge of DC characters. Now I kind of regret it because, they'll do comparisons of Marvel characters and DC. Who would win this? And I'm like, oh, I can't participate because I don't really
know.
Yeah, I don't know. So I was like, is it even a valid comparison? So it's like, I kind of miss out on geeking on things like that. So that's one regret.
That's kind of me. I think I 5th grade for me too. My mom, but instead of kids at school, is my mom. I think I had strep throat or something. My mom came home with a stack of comic books, but they were all DC comic books, and so that's how I got hooked. Was on DC Comics. For when I was homesick for like three or 5 days or something like that in the 5th grade.
Did you read a lot of Marvel? Or was it
I did not. No, it was almost strictly DC. I had a friend, though. I was able to keep track with Marvel because I had a friend who was all Spider-Man, all X-Men. So he and I kind of balanced each other out. We were the only 2 comic book nerds that I knew of in my school, me and my friend Tommy. So do you remember your first comic book you got? You said it was Marvel, probably.
The first comic book. So it's
Hmm.
kind of even before the fifth grade. You know, I would see comic books and I would be like, "Oh, this is cool," but I wasn't really reading them.
Uh-huh.
And you know, my parents at that time really thought comic books was a bad thing. It would like make
Melt
me
your
dumb.
brain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it wasn't like they even encouraged us to have comic books, but I saw them around. So I guess technically the first comic book I read was probably, I can't remember. It was either a Namor or
Mm.
a Power Man and Iron Fist
Oh, cool.
comic book. Yeah, it's funny because sometimes I'll slip and call Luke Cage Power Man. You
Uh-huh.
know? So because I'm still used to him as Power Man as opposed to
For all
Luke.
you youngins out there, that's was his comic book for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
um, well, that's really, really cool. I love that question. I love hearing people's first comic book they remember, because I don't think that I've had anybody say the same comic book twice, which just goes to show the vast influence that comic books have, and the vast amount of titles out there that people enter through so many different streets and avenues and stuff. It's really cool. I used to say my first was a Superman comic book, but it wasn't. I had a guest on more recently who triggered my memory. That was actually illustrated novel of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and it scared the shit out of me.
You know what? Speaking of jog memory, that reminds me. I used to read these books. They were graphic novels. Now I think about it,
Hmm.
and they were like the illustrated versions of things like, you know, books from Edgar
Yeah,
Allan Poe.
yeah,
Treasure
Classics
Island.
Illustrated. I think probably that's what mine was.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. Technically, those were comic books. I never really thought
yeah,
about them as comic books, but
I know.
um,
Neither did I. And then I had Jason Douglas. He wrote a graphic novel called Parallel, but he's also a teacher by day, and he talks about putting all the comics and graphic novels out in his classroom and about the illustrated classics. And I was like, wait, I had one of those, and it just totally made me remember. um, so you've already you just finished a massive Kickstarter for Crescent City Monsters issue 4. You kind of hinted at it, but tell us maybe a little more in detail where you got the idea for Crescent City Monsters. How did that come to fruition as a storyline for you?
yeah. So you know, it's sort of like it's not really like a straight path. It's more like,
Uh huh.
so let's see, where should I start? So, um, at that time, I think it was 2016. I was really like into the Walking Dead comic book series,
Mm-hmm.
and I was into the series even before the TV series happened, right? And so I just loved the book. It was, to me, it was like, I was like, wow. So I was like, and then I heard Robert Kirkman's story about how he created the book, right? Like he kind of tricked them. Like
Uh huh.
it was always going to be a zombie story, but his editor was like, "No, zombie comic books never sell." And then he's like, "No, no, 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 they're like aliens, you know, coming up in like the he lied about." So
Uh huh. Yeah, if you've read or watched, you know they're not aliens.
yeah, yeah. So so I thought that was funny. I was like, the cojones on this guy, right? So I was like, not only did he lie to his editor, but he decided to create a zombie story, even though he was told that they were unpopular. So
Hmm.
I love that. I was like, wow. I was like, that is like some brave ass. Can I curse on this?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah, I
yeah.
was
You're
like, that's
good.
some brave ass shit. I was like, man, so I was like, I want to do my own zombie story. You know, tip my hat off to Kirkman. So I was like, I want to do my own zombie story. I want to balls out like Kirkman. So I was like, but I wanted to do like a twist to the story. So I wanted to kind of take it to the Haitian voodoo lore of what a zombie is. You know, in Haitian voodoo lore, it's not a zombie. Isn't like some guy.
Right.
You know, it's not exactly that. So I wanted to do that and then lay it over that whole New Orleans kind of feel to it. So
Hmm.
that's the origins of the story. That's how I the story was born.
Well, that's so awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. Out of The Walking Dead, more or less. That's really cool. So, how many issues? Issue 4 Kickstarter just finished.
Mhm.
30,000 plus, right? I mean, it was massive.
Yeah, 31. I was really shocked by
Wow.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you
Yeah.
just recently got 4 Glyph awards. I mean, like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
that's
Yeah.
amazing, man. I mean, you just you're sitting on top of the world right now, it would seem. And it's indie comic world, so who knows how high that is, but it's still you're making a splash, man. So how many issues do you see Crescent City Monsters being?
I'm gonna try to break Todd McFarlane's record. So it's gonna it's definitely gonna be over 300. So
All right.
whatever Spawn stops at is what I'm gonna beat it by one issue. And break
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Oh. So is that going to be the only comic coming out of the Dreamfury imprint, or is there going to be others?
There's gonna be others. So there's a couple of other side stories that not a couple, well, a few that maybe two or three that I've been working on, but it's been kind of kept on the hush, not a hush,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been in the background. I'm sure other comic creators experience this, but sometimes you start a project and you're really gun ho. One of the projects I kind of rushed, and so I didn't really feel good about it. Bring that out, so I was like, I'm gonna have to start over. um, and then I have a couple other things in the pipeline, but nothing that I want to talk about just yet.
All right, but
If I get,
we can be on the lookout for other stuff coming from Dreamfury.
oh yeah, for sure.
Very cool.
I'm trying to get as much content out there as possible. Life is short, so
Yeah. No, yeah. That's awesome. I love it. That's really, really cool. So one of the things that I'm really excited to see coming out of the Kickstarter is the crossover with this Nana the Were Spider.
oh
Um,
yeah.
how did that come about? How did that idea happen?
Well, so when I was creating the Kickstarter, I wanted to have stretch goals that were more story and book related. So
Mhm.
I fund a lot of Kickstarter projects, and for me, the coolest stretch goals are like more comic books, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I was like,
More story.
yeah, more story, more comic books. I said, let me find some crossovers, and I wanted to do crossovers that had a lot of synergy with my characters.
Hmm.
And so I reached out to my boy Greg, who's a fellow Haitian American comic book creator. Who would think that there were so many of us? Anyway, I reached out to him because his character um, fell in line with that supernatural world, and I thought it was the perfect fit. So, and I've known Greg for a while. We shared tables at Comic Con, so we're cool like that. So I was like, yo, let's do a crossover, and he was doing, yeah. So he was doing a Kickstarter
Yeah.
also. So it was like, all right, let's do this. This makes perfect sense. So
Yeah, he just finished up. I mean, a massive Kickstarter. Also, I think about 20,000 or something like that on his Kickstarter for his Nana Showtime. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
he did
So that's
great.
amazing.
Yeah, that
That's
was
really cool.
yeah. So
So, will the is Nana Crescent City Monsters crossover? Will that be available outside the Kickstarter at some point for people to buy separately?
I was kind of thinking about it. I'm not sure. Because one of the things I really like is to do some like exclusive Kickstarter stuff.
Hmm.
You can only get this on my Kickstarter. But then at the same time, I feel kind of like, like, hey, maybe we should share this with the world. So
Right.
yeah, I haven't decided yet. We'll see.
All right. So what other than is Nana any other obviously other indie titles you're following right now? You said you fund a lot on Kickstarter. What are you funding right now, or what are you keeping an eye on?
You know what? Let me go to my Kickstarter
All
fundraiser
right.
real quick, so I don't miss anything, and highlight the stuff that I really, because it's a long list and I don't want to be here forever. So let me. Okay, so yeah, is Nana definitely is one of them. Let's see. It's funny. Keanu Reeves had a Kickstarter, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I backed it, but then I was like, man, there were some other Kickstarters that were going on, and I was like, sorry, Keanu, I have the budget, So I was like, I had to, cancel him and support like 3 other Kickstarters because his Kickstarter was like really expensive.
And I think Keanu probably has the money if he doesn't quite meet goal. I mean,
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, if you looked at how he structured his Kickstarter, there was a reason why it was expensive because it was really, I think, 3 books at the same time, right?
oh wow.
It wasn't like just one book.
Okay.
So there was like a reason why it was that way. Yeah, so I have a few of them here. I'm looking at the list. Let's see. Uh we have Rumble Kings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just back that looked like a really good story. The Search for Sadiqa.
Yeah.
Um I'm sure I mispronounced that because I always mispronounce that.
Yeah.
So Greg Berman is gonna kill me. Oh, and Brian Steele, he Stealth Freeze, he
Oh yeah. He's got a new book coming out, indie
yeah,
wise. Yeah.
yeah, it's called Thomas River, and I thought
Mm-hmm.
it was really cool because it's I mean, he doesn't even really need my promotion, but I thought I'd just mention it because it looks like just a generally cool comic book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of non-superhero comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that non-superhero comic books are better than um superhero.
No, but we need all the different genres, right? I mean, we need different things for different people.
Yeah. So yeah, those are a couple of them. There's a lot more here.
Yeah.
But,
Well, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm excited about that Brian Stelfreeze one, Thomas Rivers. That looks really good. Um, so if you were, other than Iznana, because you've already done that one, or you are doing that one, but if you could do a crossover between Crescent City Monsters and any other indie book out there, what would it be?
So one of the other stretch goals besides the crossover with Isnana, there's one with Day Black
Oh
with
yeah.
Keith Cross. So
Uh-huh.
the extra comic book that everyone who pledge is getting is a crossover with 2 stories, one with Isnana, the Weird Spider, and the second one being Keith Cross's Day Black.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so
That's really
if you're
cool.
not familiar with Keith Cross, he's got, this is him right here.
Mm-hmm.
Got he's a tattoo artist, so his artwork is kind of like reflects that.
Yeah.
So it's a crossover with his character, which happens to be a vampire. And like I said before, I wanted stories and characters that have that synergy. So his
Mm-hmm.
characters are a vampire. So I was like, oh, and I was like, that's gonna be dope. And I was
Yeah.
like, vampires have long lives, so it's gonna be a throwback, or I should say, a flashback of
Mhm.
Jonas before issue 1, sort of. So it's gonna play on that time, and I wanted to do that because, well, spoiler alert, the after the first issue, we jumped from 1963 to near present day. So
Uh-huh.
I didn't really only have 1 issue to play with that young Jonas as a character in that timeline. So it's gonna
That's
be
really cool
cool.
because I know that I wanted to know more about young Jonas and what he was going through, and kind of his family background. So that's really cool. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm working on that story. So that's I'm excited about that. So another crossover I wanted to do is I just recently, I'm ashamed to say that there's a book. I'm trying to find it because I just read it. Because I want to get the title right. There's a book I just recently got. Uh, from Greg Jennings. Not Greg Jennings. Where is it? John Jennings
Oh yeah, I
is
love John.
here.
Oh yeah, Blue Hand Mojo. I love that.
Yeah, so I just finished reading this, I think Thursday, and
Uh-huh.
I'm ashamed to say that because this book's been out for a while, and I know
It has been,
John
yeah.
Jennings and the character in this. After I read this, I was like, "Whoa, this is one character here who I'd like to have a really cool crossover." Because I was like, the character is I just love it. I just
Yeah.
love the whole idea. So and it was in black and white too. So
Mhm. That's a perfect crossover.
yeah, I'm like, that's perfect. Like,
I'm going to pop up this from Concrete Comics. Did you envision this success? How close are you to the path you imagined your career would go in? What a great question.
yeah, it's a good question. So I'm a big believer in visualizing everything that you want, right? I think if you do that, that really kind of helps. But when I first started, my goals weren't like, oh, I want to make it big time, as big as Robert Kirkman. I just kept it, well, in my humble opinion, I just kept it to the goal of being I want to be a comic creator, or just a creator or writer in general, that can live off, make a living off just creating. So
Mhm.
quit that 9 to 5 and just do full time creating. So that was my vision, my
Mhm.
long term vision, and my short term vision when I started. Like, let's say, so I committed to the idea of creating a comic book in December of 2016.
Mhm.
I didn't start actually creating a comic until like maybe 2 or 3 months later, and it was a web comic. So at that
Mhm.
level, I didn't have a print comic book, and I just started a website to create the web comic. At that level, my what I envisioned was just to go to cons and sit at a table as a comic book creator and sell my comic books. That was like, to me, that was like, yeah, I made it. So, because at that time I had no comic book. I've never created a comic book. Well, I take that back. So in the 5th and 6th grade, I forgot to mention that I used to actually draw comic books and sell them to classmates.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, I've always wanted to do. Well, it was one of those things that I love to do. So yeah, I didn't really. It's hard to imagine success. Like when you start off, it's hard to imagine like where you're gonna go. You can picture, like, you can say, oh, I want to be big time, like Todd McFarlane, but you never really understand like what that means until you start on that path.
Mhm.
So yeah. Um, did I
Well, and then
envision the success? Part of it, yeah. Let's say, yeah, part of it.
Concrete also followed that up with how many changes did your story go through before you released the first issue?
How many changes?
Mhm.
Wow, that's a good question because
Your first Kickstarter was what, like December 2018 or something like that?
yeah, 2018. It
So
might have been.
2016 you had the idea, 2018 Kickstarter. What kind
It,
of changes went through it?
so Giancarlo Bernal's artwork really kind of changed what I thought of the story. So there were a lot of scenes that I initially had in my head before I wrote it
Mhm.
that I wanted to write, but um, as Gene was giving me the pages, I was really inspired by his artwork,
Mhm.
and it kind of like, so I'm a big believer, like, as a writer, comic book writer. I try to, when I see a particular, once I start writing and I see the artist style, I start envisioning the story in their style, and so
Mhm.
the story might take a different direction, and the characters might have a
Mhm.
different feel, and certain things like I would do more of. And like, for example, if an artist feels like their artwork should be more grounded in reality, then I'll start writing that way, But if I see this artist has more leans towards more like fantasy, I'm like, oh, maybe I should start writing some fantasy things to it. So it's the way I feel about the artist artwork.
Mhm.
So initially I have an idea, of course, and then based on what the style of the artist, I'll start. And I gotta say, Gene really he influenced a lot of the direction where the story is going based on his style of artwork.
I mean,
Um,
his artwork is amazing. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
I wish I had the amount of talent he has, and I don't. He has more talent in his pinky than I do on my full body.
yeah. I wish I had that talent, that drawing talent too. Man. He's he's I've said this before, but he's a genius when it comes to his artwork because his artwork is so cinematic. It's amazing. I look at the panels and I'm like, the angles that he chooses is like, and I've seen his breakdown of how he does panels. He puts a lot of work in it. You guys don't like. There's some stuff that you guys don't see that he ends up. He has to remove because he's using like especially some perspective stuff, and you won't even see it in the end result. But he puts a lot
Well,
of work in.
and right now you're posting every day for Inktober his line work
Oh
on
yeah,
your
yeah,
Instagram. That's really cool to be able to see some of that too.
yeah.
That's
His
really
line
great.
work is amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna pop this up here from Concrete. My Acolyte story had one major change before his release. He went from street level to cosmic real quick.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
Yeah, that is a big jump. What advice would you give to others who are wanting to make their first indie book?
Advice.
Hmm.
So everybody has their own way of getting their comic books out there. So I wouldn't say this is advice necessarily, but just the way I did it. So what I did is I took the route, and I was talking to one of my brothers about this earlier. So when I first started, I was trying to figure out what's the best way to approach this. To
Hmm.
just should I just do the comic book and get it printed and then sell it like in Comic Cons and whatever. But then I saw this one uh, it's really a business model, right? So where you create a web comic book, you build a following, and then
Hmm.
before you even print anything, or before you're even ready to print anything, you've already built a fan base, and then you can use that fan base to start a Kickstarter and get that funded. And I was like, okay. And I was kind of researching the part of the web comic because basically you're giving your content away for free.
Hmm.
And you would think like the first question is, well, if you're giving them content away for free, why would they buy the comic book, right?
Hmm.
That's a realistic question to ask. And you know, I discovered there were a lot of successful people who would do that, who were doing that. They would
Hmm.
create a web comic book, build an audience, for a year or two, start a Kickstarter, and boom, right out the gate, they're like, they're going. So I was like, that's the model I'm going to follow. So that's the one advice I would give people is don't wait till like you're ready to or yeah, your book is finished to market the book. As soon as as soon as you know that you're gonna create that first page, post it on Instagram, post it on Facebook, start that website, share that content as much as possible because even with Gene's amazing artwork, it still took a while to build the audience. It didn't,
Right.
it wasn't like people were like, oh wow, this art is amazing, and all of a sudden I went from 0 to 1,000 in a couple of weeks. It wasn't even like that. There's a
Right.
lot of hustle and grind, and you're gonna waste that time of hustling and grinding if you wait till the last minute because even no matter how dope your book is, you're still gonna launch to a smaller audience than necessary. I mean, your book would have to be super dope for it to, and you have to be really lucky just to be like here I am, and then all of a sudden people are like I love this and start
What?
throwing money at you. It's not gonna work that way. Trust me. You're gonna have to build that audience. and yeah, you're gonna and it's gonna and expect it to take a long time, and enjoy that long time because I'm a real impatient person, but creating comic books made me a lot more patient. I had
Mm.
to really like slow down stuff because I used to be like, come on, let's go, let's get this done, you know. So, but then when I started creating comics, I was like, okay, the process is a little takes a little longer than I thought, which was a
Mhm.
good thing for me because first, I think if like let's say Gene drew faster and things just moved along quicker, the story would have turned out a lot different.
Mhm.
I had a lot of time to marinate certain things, and I'd be walking my dog, and it's, something would occur to me, and I'm like, oh, you know what, let's do this, and so I think that was good. And then at the same time, while you're grinding and you only have like 100 follows on Instagram, you're thinking to yourself like, oh man, I want to hurry this along. I want to start building my base. But it's kind of good because you're you're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to experiment without people like saying anything. I mean, I
Right.
can do that now, but it's a little different. And then you're not in the spotlight a little. You're less in the spotlight, so you can do and say certain things. And then there are fans that were there when I had only like 100 Instagram followers,
Mhm.
and that they're still with me. So you enjoy that moment and you think back like, oh yeah, I remember such and such. And so it just enjoy the journey,
Mhm.
because the destination isn't always what you think it is. Like, or you
I
get
love
there and
that.
you're like, you only spend a few minutes there and you're moving on to the next place. So,
I love that.
yeah.
Reggie Byers, I don't know if you know Reggie Byers or not. He has a book out right now called Afro Boy and Puff Girl, but he was big in the indie scene in the early 90s. And he said the same thing when I interviewed him about webtoons, about how, like, if you got an idea, just put it out there, even on the Webtoons app, because if you have an idea, there's a fan base for it. Just get it out there, and get it out in the open and start building that fan base. And so I love that about that. You kind of echoed that same advice and that same path. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Newton, thank you so much for being here today, and tell everybody where they can find your books, how they can get notified of future projects.
Yeah, you can get my books at dreamfurycomics.com. That's dream FURY comics.com. We sell issues 1 to 3 there. And you can follow me on social media at the handle of Dream Fury Comics, both on Instagram and Facebook, and also Twitter. Um, so yeah, hollow at us, follow us.
Very cool. Well, thank you again for being here. I so appreciate it. Even with you having family stuff come up today, I appreciate you still taking the time to sit down and talk. And we're looking forward to having Newton and some other guys back on the show at some point soon to talk about Kickstarter campaigns too. So we'll do that in the future as well once we get a few more details nailed down. Newton, thank you so much. Everybody out there, we will all see you later.
All right, thanks, Brett. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.